Hello, welcome to my weekly vlog series. I'm Matthew Sturdman, and this vlog will be covering my journey through discovering new worlds. It's a class I'm taking at Full Sail University as I try to obtain my bachelor's degree in creative writing for entertainment. So what am I going to be doing in this class? Well, just like it sounds, I'm going to be creating a world. And what does that mean? That means research. Research can generally have a negative connotation to it. Usually people might think of themselves in, say, history class, researching, the Revolutionary War, other things that, are important and fascinating, but you might not necessarily have a particular passion for. This is different. I'm going to be researching a plethora of things to develop the world that I have in my head. So hopefully that when I put it into book form or screenplay form, that it will come alive, that it'll be interesting to see. It won't just be like a two-dimensional setting for a story. It'll be the world itself will be alive and vibrant. So this first week, the main thing we had to do was pick a world. What are we going to do? I had two choices. The first was a story that I've been kind of kicking around in my head for a couple of years now. I actually tried to write a book based in this world a couple of years ago for National Novel Writing Month. I didn't finish, and I did very, very little research, mainly just the structures and the status of different cities during and after the Civil War. The other idea was new, which scared me a little bit. I'd only had it for a couple of weeks or so. I originally was going to go with the first one. I thought, well, I've been trying to write it. I've got the story in my head, just not the world, so hey, it'll be perfect, right? I don't have to worry about the story, just have to figure out the world. Problem was I wasn't really passionate about it. That's not to say that I'm throwing that one away. It's just at the moment I didn't want to write it. It didn't interest me. I kept thinking about that other idea. So that's what I'm going with. So where are we at with that? Well, essentially, I had an image in my head of a lone spaceship in a different galaxy altogether, floating there. There's a single man inside the ship, and he's strumming a guitar, and it sounds horrible for a little bit. He's never seen a guitar before. He doesn't even know that it is called a guitar. It's just a random item that he bought off of a junker, someone who goes to other worlds and other galaxies and brings back items and sells them. It's essentially a trinket, a tchotchke for most, but he was fascinated by the sound that it made. So he keeps playing, and eventually he starts playing a Jimi Hendrix song. And it turns out that this is a guitar that was owned by Jimi Hendrix, and this junker actually brought it from a planet called Earth, a planet that is now dead. So as he's playing, he starts getting visions of where this guitar came from, this other world, and essentially he sort of discovers music. And in this galaxy, the idea of music has been eradicated. Pretty much any sort of art, entertainment, culture, it was destroyed by a tyrant who had control over this galaxy for a very long time. And he destroyed the history behind it. So the idea of music it needs to be rediscovered basically in this galaxy, and this guy's going to do it. And not only is he going to do it, but he's going to do it to assist a group of adventurers in a very important quest to stop this tyrant that I just talked about from regaining control. There's a lot of stuff there, right? So the first thing I wanted to do was get my influences in check, right? What influenced me? Influences are very, very important. It's not that you're stealing from the things that you love, but if you watch something that might be similar, it can kind of help spark new ideas or new ways of approaching it. There's the biggest influence for this idea. It may have been what sort of helped birth the idea in my head, because it is a sci-fi story. And I've got it actually right here, if I can get it down without making all my books fall. Saga by Brian K. Vaughan. This is volume 2 I have all the volumes up here, though. This is a fantastic story. I am actually a recent discovery. I recently discovered Brian K. Vaughan. Most people know him from writing Why the Last Man, which is a fabulous book. This is where I know him from, though. So I was looking to get back into comics, and I didn't want to get back into Marvel or get back into DC because there was too much backstory that I wasn't aware of anymore. I didn't want to have to pour through Wikipedia articles and figure out, who's, angered who and who's dead and who's not dead, what's going on. So Image, right? Image makes awesome comics. I could just jump in from the get-go. This just looked fascinating, so I picked it up. And man, am I glad I did. It's a fascinating story. Everyone should read it. And this picture on the back is actually something I think of a lot when I'm thinking of this story. I don't know if you can see it from here, but we have a female character that's in the story here. And she is sitting on top of a part of a ship, reading a book and blowing some bubble gum. So it's just sort of an interesting take on your standard sci-fi, and that's kind of what I want to do. So that's one influence that I had. What else? Well, of course, you've got stuff like Firefly, right? Space western. I'm not going for necessarily the western motif. I'm going for more of a dark fantasy, and then sort of kooky love letter to 70s, 80s, 90s rock and roll thing going on. But it's still an interesting take, and of course, I would be remiss, if I didn't mention the greatness that is, of course, Star Wars. We all love Star Wars, so there you go. And the main thing that's influenced me from Star Wars about the story is just the space opera of it all, right? Is that it's not just ships shooting other ships or laser cannons, whatever. We're looking at relationships. We're looking at family dynamics, politics. There's gonna be quite a bit going on in this world. So those are my main influences, right? The other thing, as I've already mentioned it, was the love letter to 70s, 80s, 90s rock and roll. So this is the part that I'm really going to be experimenting with in the story, something I've never really done before, is taking this one theme, which is music and what music means, especially like rock and roll music, and then merging that with a story, with a science fiction story. So how am I going to do that? Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out, right? Rock and roll is a very powerful force, and I want to see if I can make that force a force to be reckoned with in this other universe. So, of course, there's people like Jimi Hendrix, who I already mentioned, Rush, Led Zeppelin, Iggy Pop, of course, the Stooges, going along with Iggy Pop, Joan Jett, the Runaways, the Pixies. Of course, bands like Nirvana, Mudhoney, the Melvins. Mainly those 3 decades is what I'm going to be focusing on, and sort of bringing some of the attitudes of those different decades into this story, and the worlds in this galaxy. Some of the species will have certain characteristics from those genres, which I have a few ideas on that I'm pretty excited to get to, but that's a little far-reaching. So that was the first week, was picking my world. So I've got that world right. It's in my head. You can tell that I've already thought a lot about this. But I had to start doing research, right? And I've done quite a bit, so a long ways to go. But the main things I've been researching right now is the science of the world, essentially. What kind of atmosphere does this world have, right? What are the weather patterns? I started looking at different weather patterns, of course, that exist in real life, and how they work, and how the atmosphere works, and what it does, and the different layers of the atmosphere. The reason I keep saying atmosphere is, and this will take me to the sheets that I'm about to talk about, is that's something that I didn't even think of before this class, and now it could potentially become a pretty big deal in this story. So the thing that we have to do right now in class is we have to the thing we have to do in class is we have to fill out these character development and world building worksheets. They're just pages and pages of questions, right? And they're all over the place. So like for characters, you've got your basic stuff, right? Where did he or she come from? What do they look like? Who is their mother? Who is their father? And then it even goes, deeper. What are the styles of clothing they wear? What is their deepest secret? It really gets into it. So that's the first one I did, was the character sheet, and the character really came alive in my head. Before, if you go back and watch or listen to my description of the world, I mentioned the guy in the ship playing the guitar, right? But I didn't really get into specifics about him, because when I originally had that idea, I didn't have specifics for him. Now I do. As I started answering those questions, it became less of me answering the question and more of the character just forming in my head and me just filling it in as he kind of came alive. So really, really exciting. I really, really like the character that came into my head. And I can't wait to write him, right? But then I moved to the world building. So I took that, it was done, moved to the side, grabbed the world building sheet. Wow. So the basics I had. I have the main planet that the bulk of the story, well, I really shouldn't say the bulk of the story, but at least what the story revolves around is this one planet. It's you could consider it the capital planet of Chris. So that's what I focus for the world building on, right? Is the continents, how the weather works, and then just like I was saying earlier, atmosphere. So the first few questions I was good, right? I sort of knew the dialects that were going to be on it, the overall geography. I had kind of a basic idea there. But then it asked me, what was the atmosphere? And that kind of stumped me a little bit. I was like, I don't know, it's an atmosphere, what does it matter? But then I started thinking, well, what does our atmosphere do? So I did some research. And I looked at the different layers of the atmosphere. And the big thing I looked at was the mesosphere, which is the layer that burns, essentially, rocks hurtling towards us from space. And I thought, I want this planet to be dangerous, especially the northern continent. It's very harsh there, and there's a big juxtaposition between the northern and the southern continent. So I thought, what if this has a very thin mesosphere on this planet? So specifically, in the way it's directed, to where, asteroids and stuff aren't really being burned up. So they're under constant threat. And that's something that I can definitely play around with. So that kind of created some ideas for some different storylines, or at least some different elements and some different action items I could have in the stories. So that's just one example. And then I just kept going. I needed to think of the governments of the people. In the northern continent, I have people who are still living under the routine of this tyrannical leader, right? You could sort of call him a fascist. So I started researching, fascist rulers. We all know, of course, the big ones out there, but that's not really what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to make like a Hitler story. And then I've got the southern continent, who you could say is like sort of a hippy-dippy sort of cult type group there. So that's another thing I started researching, was cults and self-sufficient communities, right? Because cult does, again, this isn't necessarily a cult, but people do see them as a cult. So that was the other thing. Just because in the trueness of the story, they're not a cult, other people see them as a cult. So that means I both have to research cults so I can explain why these other groups see them as that. But then I also have to research actual just self-sufficient communities. Not cults, just groups of people working and living together, because that's really what they are. So I had to research both, to really to get that idea so I can write it well. So that's pretty much where I'm at right now. Excuse me. So that's pretty much where I'm at right now. I've got a lot more research to do, but I've got my world building done. I've still got some other planets that I kind of have to work out here, but the main story, I won't necessarily be traveling there quite yet. And then, of course, my character really came to life on the page, and I am excited. So look forward to another vlog, and thank you for watching.